How's it going, everyone? Session here. Welcome to the Futures Rewritten Theoretical Ultimate presentation. We have now reached the final phase, that being phase five's mechanics. And again, I do want to just give like a very quick heads up and final warning that this is a fun presentation guide. It has absolutely nothing to do with the current guide functional format and structure to be able to do the Futures Rewritten Ultimate. So definitely refrain from using this as any type of source because objectively this is not going to be able to apply any value to how you can actually execute the ultimate. So just want to give you that heads up. Now, with the mechanics in mind, we will be similarly covering, as we have been, the current version of the format as the ultimate mechanics are for phase 5 with Pandora, and then we'll cover what I would have made changes for to allocate what would have increased the difficulty but also add a good storytelling perspective with the ultimate in mind as well. Let us now cover the mechanics of Pandora. Now, let's assume that we have been retaining all the information that we have so far with regards to the current theoretical version of the ultimates in mind. So if you've correctly done the puzzles of phases 2 through 4, then realistically the boss will be targetable, and keeping both memories of fate and relativity alive, we would see that Pandora is able to be targetable and have two debuffs attached, the memories of fate and relativity. Each memory that is not promised is a debuff that will reduce the damage dealt by the boss per element, so it is stackable. Additionally, if one memory was missing, then the element that is missing will have piercing, invuln, and transcendence damage, making tank invulnerability and revive useless. So any attack that the boss does will pierce that and actually hit you still, even all that being said. Additionally, it will replace the missing buff with the memory of promise. And the memory of promise will alter a lot of the mechanics that are imbued by the elements, and as a result make the fight a lot more challenging than what it currently is, and therefore allowing you to still technically prog the fight, but you will be dealing with a lot of mechanical messiness that you wouldn't actually accrue to if you had actually done it correctly. So if you were doing this in like a first time scenario basis, then you would still be able to technically prog the fight, but you would have a lot of difficulty doing so, knowing that there is both the buff as well as the debuff. The boss will be targetable, and again, if you had the memory of promise buff and either the fate memory or relativity memory, then it will deal increased damage. It'll notify the damage down gained from the good memory, so everything will hurt immensely. And again, this is meant to be like a constant pressure, if you will. And the final raid wide will not be L3able and allow you to reach phase 6. Because in my current theoretical construct of the ultimate, there is actually a final phase, and Pandora is not it. So I wanted to make that be clear as well, that we do need to use LB3 for phase 5 at the end during Paradise Lost in order to actually use the opportunity to enter phase 6, which we told in the storytelling guide. Now, mechanically, Fulgent Blade will function the exact same thing if both memories of fate and relativity are active. So as you know, there's going to be the XOAs, as everyone calls it. There will be 3 pairs of lines that will kind of cross over each other, and then they'll either kind of go in like a clockwise or counterclockwise sweep motion, so you just dodge them accordingly and get ready for the inevitable Akmorn at the end. However, if memory of promise was active as a result of the buff, then the tank that has the missing memory has to take a harder hitting auto. It doesn't actually have any particular impact on the Fulgent Blades themselves, but the boss will be doing a lot harder attacks to the tank. So let's say, for example, in this case, I am main tank with memory of fate, which is correct, but the off tank was missing memory of relativity. Then there would be the memories of fate and promise, and so therefore the off tank would take a much harder hitting auto that would actually require some type of mitigation, it being like 90s and short, and even some heals from the healers to keep that particular player alive while still dodging and dealing with the mechanic of Fulgent Blade as a result. And then, as we kind of segue further into it, the Akmorn will go off in the same function as Pandora. So once you've had that inevitable split, then you'll have the party split into 4 groups of East and West, and then take the stacks respectively and have it not be too much of an issue. However, if an Akmorn was powered by the memory of promise, then the party that is actually getting hit with the promised variation would be hit with the stack attack twice, and the stack would actually be larger. So the coverage is going to be actually a bit wider. So you'd have to be farther away from the party that's doing the light party stacks in order to just ensure survivability. And granted, with enough mitigation, it'll actually allow you to survive the attack. And even if you were able to use like a macrocosmos, for example, and like allow the party to survive even like a little bit further, it would still work in this case scenario. But then if you wanted to use an ability like Macrocosmos for a later mechanic, you wouldn't be able to do so because you use it for this attack, right? So that's the idea, at least in mind, with this. Now, the boss will start casting Wings of Dark and Light, and it will resolve as normal if it's buffed with both memories of Fate and Relativity. So the current example for it too, right? There's a tower that gets treated as True South. The boss's wings will start casting a element first and foremost, and it'll do that cleave first, and then it'll be swapped to the alternate element, and then this is like a tank buster combo swap, if you will, along with dealing with towers. So as you can see here, it's casting light, so the tank that is currently holding aggro would stand to the right, so that the cleave covers the entire left side, and then because that's being done in that format, the off tank would have to be right outside of the hitbox so that they can actually take the tank buster that is going to be tethered to them, and then you would have to swap as normal and then dodge accordingly. So the actual functionality of the mechanic is still the exact same thing as it is here. Now, if it was buffed with the Memory of Promise, the boss will do invuln piercing damage, which again, if you had the off tank take the actual cleave, this does not affect the person that is under the boss taking the actual buster. So they're still fine. But the person that's currently here taking the wide cleave would be hit twice. And if they did use invuln, it would pierce invuln. And so it'll also do a follow-up attack with another cone that will kind of stay in the same place. So as you can see here, it'll cover the same ground as normal if it was the opposite attack, but then it'll do a cone that particularly aims directly at that player. And again, no matter what happens, if they get hit, it's just a GG scenario, so they'll be wiped for it as a result, and then they'll be dead. And then again, you have to recover that as much as you possibly can. Now, the boss's next mechanic will be polarizing strikes. And again, with the correct buffs of relativity and fate on hand, it'll be resolved as it currently is, and you have to do like your, you do the attack, then you swap, and then you do wild charge 4 times, and you swap back and forth until everyone has gotten a hit, and it'll be executed as normal. Now, if there was the Memory of Promise buff, the line AoE normally will go off in the first hit, and then have a follow-up, and then you swap, and then you do it again. The difference, however, is that the line AoE follow-up does not disappear, so the stack must be taken elsewhere. And as you can see, it's going to start to get a little messy. So the line AoE people would still have to swap places, but just the placement for that stack would actually be a lot more trickier since there's a little bit of less space to deal with it. And you can definitely tell that as a result of this does get like a lot more chaotic as a result. And again, still livable, but just much more complicated to deal with. Now, as a result of this too, if you somehow manage to survive it, the boss will begin casting Pandora's Box. So with both memories in mind, it'll be tank LB3 with some light mitigation and be survivable as normal. Normally, there is maybe like a simple, healer shield and maybe like another small like short mint by the healer, and then LB3 will be performed with the tanks, and then you survive it and it's no problem. But with Memory of Promise being active during this cast, it would require a much heavier flow of mitigation by a lot of players to actually make the attack survivable. So once again, you can survive it. It's just going to hurt a lot much more than it would in a normal case scenario. And then the mechanics will repeat as normal until the boss casts Paradise Lost. So assuming that you've managed to complete this entire mechanic with both memories intact, then the fight is normal as it currently is now. But with Memory of Promise, if you somehow make it to the end of Paradise Lost, which is practically like near impossible, if you will, then it'll go off as normal. Now, the difference here, though, is that the boss's HP must be under 10%, and respectfully, there isn't going to be a use of DPS LB3 during this. I don't think so. So ideally, if you had the boss at 10% during the cast, in order to enter the final phase, you will be given LB in the same format as you would as a result of the memory buffs. But similar to phase 3, if you remember, we used LB3 while casting Memories End on Gaia to give her temporary consciousness. So in this same format, a healer must use LB3 in order to finally and fully separate Metron from Pandora and give full consciousness back to Reen and Gaia. And so this will actually incorporate the opportunity to give the cutscene segue going into the final phase. And additionally, as a result of Pandora's consciousness being fully actively and aware, she would grant the party with the buff for saving them the promise of friendship as a result of removing Metron's influence. The Promise of Friendship is a perma buff that provides a damage up buff, a vulnerability down buff, and a perma regen buff to the party as long as they're not KO'd. So you will take these stat upgrades and bring them into the final phase, which is necessary for your majority of survivability and damage check. And should you die, it'll just make phase 6 that's much harder because obviously you'll lose the buff as a result, and so you don't want to do that. Now, should we somehow deal with the scenario and proceed to the end, Metron, having no corporeal form and unable to fulfill his promise while in Pandora form, for Gaia will summon Eden's promise and the arena will darken. If you went to go see the story cutscene, if you will, we kind of had like that little presentation of what it would have looked like, and then the arena would darken and then proceeds to transform into the Forgotten Promise, which is the name of the final boss for phase 6 for this theoretical ultimate. And then we have ourselves a whole myriad of new mechanics to deal with that have to do with fragment memories and a lot of whole imbuements and a whole lot of junctions and a whole lot of mechanics. And I haven't created that, but if you'd like me to, let me know, and I'm happy to give it my best. But again, this is me creating like a whole brand new phase of mechanics, and I have never done it before in my life, so we'll see how this goes out for us. Now, if during Paradise Lost, Pandora has the Memory of Promise buff, and again, if you somehow make it to the very end, the LB gauge will not fill, which means that you can't use healer LB3 to actually restore Reen and Gaia's consciousness in Pandora form away from Metron. So that way, Pandora will also not be able to reach 0%. So even if you try and kill her, you're not supposed to anyways, but if you try to, wouldn't work out. And then it'll be a forcible opportunity for Pandora to actually fully cast off the Paradise Lost, and then that will be the final attack that wipes the raid in its entirety. So that at least is the idea that is pleasant in mind for this mechanic. And I think that if we had this opportunity overall, mechanically speaking, for everything that boiled down to it, this would have been a much more cinematically and like puzzle breaking moment of an ultimate that I think would have been a lot more appealing to the fans as a result. At least I kind of hope so, because again, this is like a fun project that I've created for myself and put into construct too. So again, there could be opportunities that you can make it actually more challenging, more unique, more different, more satisfying and appealing. But again, this is like a project that I kind of just put together and made it what it was. And honestly, overall, for me to actually, for the first time in my entire existence of playing 14 for the decade that I have been, I'm very proud of being able to actually create such a fun little project, so I'm really grateful and thankful that people have been enjoying this, at least in terms of the support and feedback that I've received about it. So I'm really thankful and appreciative for it too. So I did want to say thank you as a result. And officially, there you have it. So that is the totality of the Futures Rewritten presentation. I know that it's a much longer series than I kind of expected it to be. I was thinking that it was going to be just like a storytelling segment, and then we talk about that, and then create like the full-ended version where we have all the mechanics laid out. But I did try and do like a little bit of time crafting to figure out how long it would have taken, and realistically, it was going to be close to like a 2-hour type of explanation. It also didn't give me a lot of time to really think about how to prepare myself in advance for it too. So I think this version of it just kind of like really bodes well, and at least it's more digestible too in that factor as well. So again, I just want to say thank you so much for all the support over the course of time. It's been an incredible journey just being able to be part of this experience in this world, and again, it sounds very like, but again, long story short, like I'm very thankful. And then I hope that you've enjoyed this. And of course, hopefully we don't encounter another scenario where a raid tier or an ultimate is very like, just not cinematically appealing to the same like breadth of air that we kind of expect when we reach that final phase. And again, I just want to reiterate as well that I personally enjoy doing Futures Rewritten. I've cleared it, I don't even know, like 7 or 8 times at this point, and like the ultimate is a lot of fun. But I think that as someone who actually was like a really, really huge fan of the storytelling for the ultimate in its entirety, I was aiming for the idea that Pandora being revealed wasn't actually like the final boss, and I was also thinking that the difficulty of the ultimate would have allocated the idea that it was going to be at the same level of DSR, and so for me to actually be very observant through it all, and I just felt like it just didn't really hit that mark anywhere near close, and so that's why we created this project as well, just as like a love letter, if you will, to what ultimates I would like to have them be in terms of thriving with difficulty in mind, as well as mechanical functionality and cinematic storytelling, because a lot of people will agree that a lot of the older ultimates are very like oh my gosh moments. And I feel like some people may have felt this way when they entered this ultimate, but for me personally, didn't really hit that same kind of, impact and feeling. And so I was hoping that this version would do exactly that. And hopefully that was the case scenario. So, but that's the presentation. So I want to say thank you again for watching and tuning in. And of course, if there's any questions or thoughts or feedback, please let me know. Again, I've been receiving nice positive support on this too, so it's kind of nice to know that people are not mad at me for remaking like my own version of an ultimate. But I had a lot of fun doing this, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this. So thank you again for watching and tuning in, and I appreciate you. And of course, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.